seedlings are normally transplanted to the field after 8 weeks of sowing, when the seedling has a base as thick as a pencil and is approximately 15 centimeters tall.
Onion seeds don't have a high dormancy rate like capsicum seeds. What you do is that once you do the nursery, you can actually drench what can help you make sure you have an even germination. Onion seedlings also, seeds don't have a hard time germinating. It will depend a lot on how you prepare your nursery. The challenge with onions is bulbing on the farm. That is the biggest challenge. So that one you can always correct it with the kind of fertilizer you're using, how well your farm, the soil nutrients are on the farm.
Mulching onions with composted leaves and straw is highly recommended to maintain soil organic content. Onions respond very well to decomposed organic manure. Organic manure at 25 to 40 hectares is recommended to obtain a high bulb yield.
We rarely use the word fertilizer these days, apparently. So what we do is nutrition. So when it comes to the nutrition of onions, remember onions, number one, it requires a lot of nitrogen. But once you test your soil, and I cannot avoid repeating that over and over, once you test your soil, you will find that probably this soil texture has more nitrogen. And so it does not need a lot of nitrogen-based fertilizer. Or you'll find one that has phosphorus. So for me, what I've got here is almost general. And so I start off with the high phosphorus fertilizer. Why high? Because number one, it requires a good amount of phosphorus for it to take up very fast. And this is now direct feeding the crop. I also do a split application of fertilizer. Instead of the normal every 30 days, I do every 2 weeks, but I reduce the quantity. So I do 5 grams. For the DAP, I do the 10 grams per plant. And then after that, we do a nitrogen fertilizer, so that now the leaves can take up very fast. I think you'll see part of it behind there. And then as it starts bulbing, because when you prepare the nursery very well and the land very well, bulbing will start taking shape within the first and 1.5 months.
Onions are very prone to foliar diseases and bulb rots, such as the slimy or sour outer scales, a bacterial disease that significantly reduces onion bulb quality. Some of the pests that attack onions and garlic include nematodes, stem, bulb eelworm, thrips, and onion fly or maggot.
There's one danger. I remember when you talked about watermelon, there's one big danger of onions. It's called thrips. When thrips get into your farm, if you don't manage it well, you lose all the onions. Yeah. So thrips is a big challenge. We also, and one of the things that we do is just that now we're harvesting, so we already removed. We normally have like blue stickers. So thrips are attracted to the color blue. So what happens is that they come and stick there. You know, when it sticks there, then you have few infestation. Something else is that onions, like any horticulture, has a lot of challenges in terms of diseases. We have purple blotch, we have downy mildew, but what happens is that with good management, and that's now where we come in as Africa Farmers Club, we try and make sure that before you plant onions, we actually guide you through and ask you a few questions like, how is your farm? Do you have somebody who can scout? And if we get into an agreement, we can actually even send one of our agronomists to come actually see and assist you in coming up with a good spray program that is fit for your farm, as well as just help you monitor and see how best your onions are doing. More so, we're interested in how we can impart new skills to young people so that they can see agriculture not as an option for failure or an option of because they don't have food, but viewing agriculture as a source of employment, as a career that they can be able to get sustenance out of.
Well, I hope you're learning so much about onion farming. As you've seen today, we are talking about onion on the horticulture show. We found Noah on his farm when he's about to harvest part of his onion plantation. Noah, thank you so much for having us today on your farm. We really appreciate. Let's go see how you're harvesting the onions, and maybe you can also teach us some few tidbits on onion farming.
Okay. So one of the things is the good practices. So what we normally do sometimes is that we, depending on the weather, the onions, the top part of the onions normally dry and fall, okay? But if this doesn't happen, we normally you do it yourself. Why you do it yourself is because sometimes you want the bulb to dry faster on the farm, depending on the weather. But you can see for now, because it's still been raining, they didn't fall early. So sometimes we actually just let them down. We normally call them, this is the neck of the onion. And so this shows you this is the right time to harvest onions. And so depending on where you want to put them, we normally just uproot all of it. Sometimes we shake, sometimes we cut this here, this part. And then when you have a knife, there are two options. Sometimes the option is now you can harvest like this and then take them to a place. But if you have the nets ready, you can actually just cut them here, the tip of the, like that, and then put them in neti moja. Yeah. And then now we just put them. But remember, if they have not dried well, you will need to still dry them. This is just probably for portability, for carrying them from the farm to the area there, you know. So something else that is important, it's very important since you're also in business, to know how many kilos were harvested on each line. So if you're doing drip irrigation, you need to know how many kilos came out from which line, because it will give you a projection of 30 minutes, and you'll see what really went wrong any part of the farm. So once you harvest like this, so what you do is that you try as much as possible to pack this. The one that I've taken, I've gotten two heads. So you make sure you harvest these ones very well.
So what can an onion have like 2 heads like that?
Sometimes it's a seed variety. Most of the time it's deformities. But sometimes also it's just the crop management that was not done well. Probably the fertilizer was not done on time. Yeah, but most of the time it's normally a variety. And so this is the size of bulb that most people are looking for. This particular one, like this. It's like 100 grams, 80 to 100 grams. And if you look at 80 to 100 grams, you'll see the projection that you actually get from an acre, depending on the quantity of seeds you planted. You'll easily know even before you start harvesting what you can get out of it. Yes.
What happens when one of the onions come out like smaller like this one, and maybe they were planted at the same time?
Sometimes it's just when you're applying fertilizer, it didn't reach there. It didn't reach evenly. It was not applied evenly. But this can still be sold. So that's why it's important to know. And I was mentioning earlier, when you're talk to different markets. There's some markets, like for example, one who was buying from us the other day told us we also pack this one and pack them in different nets. We pack the big ones separately because not all people. If you're just alone, you don't need a bigger onion than this one. Right? Yeah. So basically, when harvesting is not a challenge. Onions, most of them, if done well, dried well, they have a long shelf period. Sometimes onions can even be harvested and stored for almost, I can say even a month or even 2 months. Tanzania.
How do you preserve them so that you don't have post-harvest losses?
So what I advise farmers, especially if you're in business, you don't buy stock to keep, you buy stock to sell. So if you're doing onions, try and look for markets so that when you harvest, you avoid the cost of storing them. Number one, you avoid the cost of building a whole structure again, which you'll only be using when you are harvesting onions. And once you avoid that, then you reduce your costs. But if you really have to store, make sure you're storing them in a place not direct sun, and then it's well aerated as well. Water cannot get in, so you don't put them on the floor. I've seen some people drying onions like the way we dry maize. It's very wrong. If you let them stay in the sun, they start scorching, and since now it's not being watered regularly, it starts burning and it will create some like this, like you see, like this part. And this will not be sold. Yes.
At home, sometimes maybe like us women, we buy onions in bulk, maybe for a whole week, and you find like there's one that is rotting. What's the best way that you can advise now these women how to store their onions?
I've never been good at advising women.
Oh, you don't know.
But one of the things is that just make sure when you're buying the onions, they're well dried. And you will always know if you buy onions that are still watery, you can put the onions outside in the shed for them to dry. Yeah, that just helps preserve the onions, and you can use them for a longer period. Yes.
Okay, let me try and harvest one onion.
Yes.
And see how easy or hard it is. Is this one ready?
You can harvest this one.
Not ready. Ah. Just here. Because you were waiting for me.
Yeah. So what we do is that even when so you hold it. So this one is rotting because of the water. There's a lot of water, and you can even see this area had a lot of water. You can see it splitting the heads. So that's one of the things. So even when you're planting the first, as I was mentioning, the last 3 weeks, make sure it doesn't get you reduce the watering. The last 2 weeks actually you can actually stop watering. So that at least the best is if it can dry when it's still on the farm, it's much better. Yeah. Then we also store them in nets. So this is also an indication, even when you're storing, make sure it's a place where it's aerated well. Yeah.
Why nets? Why not polythene?
Polythene will sweat. This one needs aerated so that it continues drying. Yes, and maintains its pungent smell. Yes, yes. Sometimes, like for example, onions from Ethiopia have a very strong pungent smell, but because it's dry, so they dry much better on the farms. Yes.
The biggest challenge that onion farmers in the country face is the regular importation of onions from Tanzania and Ethiopia.
I'll mention the Tanzanian onions. We also have the Ethiopian onions coming in Kenya. The Tanzanian onions, it has been a debate for quite a long time. It's just like maize from Zambia as well. But the amount of onions that are coming from Tanzania is slowly killing the Kenyan market. It's really slowly killing the Kenyan farmers, because you'll find the cost of production in Tanzania is much lower. It's much lower because some of the chemicals that they're using are banned in Kenya. Tanzanian farmers don't have any VAT on the chemicals and inputs. For us, we have. And so if we can be able to change that, that can also help us be a big market.
The other challenge that Noah speaks of is the taxation of farm inputs such as the fertilizers used for onion farming.
And so if the chemicals that we are using can be able to be reduced in terms of the VAT, if it is reduced in VAT, in chemicals as well as fertilizer, then we will have an edge.
In conclusion, Noah ends by encouraging farmers to practice agriculture not as a hobby, but as a business. He also insists that farmers need to be calculating their production costs versus the profits they get from their farming venture.
We need to look at farming as a business. You know, looking at how we can be able to do much more, do our projections, do our realistic projections, not the ones that are normally done so that we can get into farming, but those that we know that will work. And that is why we exist as Africa Farmers, and that is why we are actually setting up a training and resource center. Make sure you understand your cost of production very well, you know, and that's why we are getting into having practical skills training, being able to develop content that can be able to be seen by more farmers. And we're also encouraging farmers to also take time, come and visit us in this training center and see what we are doing, and so that they can be able to improve their skills, share their skills as well with other farmers, and so that we can progress as a community.
And that's all we had time for in today's edition. We hope you've learnt a lot on onion farming. Keep watching KTN Farmers TV for more educative shows.